Welcome back to another Kerbal Space Program adventure, episode 2 in my Revert to KSP 1 series, in which I not just play the OG KSP once again, but with a focus on enhancing the game with more and more mods. One mod at a time, mind, just that I don't get overwhelmed by all the new stuff, and hopefully neither do you, or at least anyone who's more familiar with stock KSP. Now, we resume things having established a location for our self-sustaining surface colony on Minmus, and having established a communications network around Kerbin's mintiest moon. But before we begin building a surface colony, I wanted to create an orbiting space station, to primarily serve as an orbiting refueling base for interplanetary spacecraft, and also to serve as a permanently crewed orbiting habitat. And of course, it would feature modded parts heavily. I briefly considered the amazing orbital colony mod by Linux Guru Gamer because, well, I mean, look at this, it's beautiful, but to be honest, an orbital colony isn't really what I wanted from this space station. It's primarily a gateway to the much grander surface space, and it's basically just a gas station for long-distance spacecraft. So instead, I went with Netea's Stocker-like Station Parts Redux mod, which, as the name suggests, adds a ton of space station parts that aesthetically line well with the stock KSP components, although of course I am using the Restock mod here that reskins the stock parts to look a bit more realistic. So I installed the Stocker-like Station Parts mod and was immediately overwhelmed with stuff. I tried out lots of different parts in the VAB, just figuring out what components this mod had to offer, and after I was done playing around with all my new toys, I then set about designing a rough layout for the space station. And this is usually how I design my stations in Kerbal Space Program. I just build the whole thing out in the spaceplane hangar or the vehicle assembly building, and then afterwards figure out how to split it up into parts that can be launched on realistic looking rockets. So right now I'm working on the fuel depot part of the station. I figured that most of the fuel stored here should be liquid fuel because long-range interstellar vessels, or not interstellar, interplanetary vessels will be using the nuclear engines, which of course require just liquid fuel, no oxidizer. But I got those 4 orange tanks and a bit of cheeky part clipping there just for aesthetics, you know, that have both liquid fuel and oxidizer. Now throughout this series I will be using more and more mods. Some mods may require different fuels that are not currently part of this station's fuel reserves or, you know, storage capabilities, but there is ample room for expansion with lots of free docking ports, so we can extend the types of fuel that this station can carry in the future if we need to. And now we are well underway with the construction of the habitation module, which features that amazing stock-like gravity ring. Normally when I make stock space stations in Kerbal Space Program, I have to use like the breaking ground rotors and use the symmetry exploit to get more than 8-way symmetry and build the ring out of lots of parts, and it's quite finicky, and every time you time warp it stops rotating. This is great, it's a single part, so it really reduces the amount of parts required. It makes things much easier to build. It also folds up really well, it deploys, and what's really cool, I didn't realize this until I did the mission, it actually continues spinning when you're going through time warp, and that's not just physical time warp, normal time warp as well, it will carry on spinning. So that's really cool. And there are lots of other kind of gravity rings included in the Stocker-like Station Parts mod, not just this one. There was an absolutely gigantic one, which I will be needing to use at some point on another space station in another video, but I felt like it wasn't really appropriate for what I wanted out of this station. It's mostly just a fairly small, I know it's huge kind of, but you know, a modestly sized refueling base above the surface of Minmus in kind of like service with the ground base below. I didn't talk about anything else because I took me so long to get through that explanation, but we have a giant solar panel array at the very top of the tower, and I also added 4 lifeboats, 3 seats each, so that's, for quick maths, 12 seats in total, so we have a total ship crew capacity for the station of 12 kerbals. I felt like a good sensible operational amount would be 6 kerbals occupying at any one time, just because, you know, the interior volume isn't that big, right? So 6 kerbals would be a good amount. So I went with 2 pilot kerbals, 2 scientist kerbals, and 2 engineer kerbals. Anyone that's familiar with this mod now probably rolling their eyes, because that means that, well, basically you'll have to just watch the video, I guess, but my choice of crew and crew roles did lead to a couple of disasters throughout the video, so stay tuned for that. What are we currently constructing right now? I think what you can see me doing now is now I've designed the station in a layout that I like. We're now going to start splitting it up into its launchable modules, basically. So this is the station core module. We have, well, I guess just that sort of panoramic observation deck there, a little crew module, and then we've got that orange fuel tank below. That's just going to move the entire station from low Kerbin orbit to Minmus orbit. We're going to build the entire thing in LKO, just because then it's a bit quicker. I'm going to make the journey out to Minmus every single time we launch stuff, and actually, that's the only reason. It's quicker and easier. And there's enough fuel there to transport the entire station, which might not seem like enough given that we have those enormous refueling tanks on the station, but those are going to get launched empty. We'll refine the fuel and fill them up at Minmus. But yeah, here is the rocket on the launch pad. And yes, I'm so excited for this little modded series, and I'm really excited to see what you guys think of the station as it comes together. This mod really is an absolute game changer in my opinion. Just like how the Opera browser has been a game changer to my daily web browsing. I absolutely love how it enhances my productivity and makes my life so much easier. You see, Opera has some amazing workspaces features that allow me to keep my tabs organized by separating them into different workspaces. This way, I can switch between work, research, and entertainment with just one click. It's like having multiple desktops within my browser. Another feature I really like is the integrated messengers. I can chat on WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger right from the sidebar without leaving my browsing session. It's so convenient and saves me a ton of time. And speaking of saving time, the Aria AI chat is an absolute lifesaver. I can highlight any text and get instant explanations or translations without needing to go to a dedicated AI website. Plus, with the new command line, I can ask any question without even needing to open Aria in the sidebar. And for all you privacy enthusiasts out there, Opera has a built-in VPN. It's free, unlimited, and keeps your browsing private and secure, activated in just one click. Honestly, Opera has transformed how I browse the web. Whether it's boosting my productivity or just generally making my online experience smoother and safer, I really can't recommend it enough. So give Opera a try today. It's free, and you can download it now using the link in the description. Okay, so now I've taken care in making sure my family is fed, let's watch the launch one more time. But not listen to it. I don't know why, but the audio for just this one specific launch of the many we'll be doing in this video, it just did not record. It wasn't like it was really quiet. I boosted it several orders of magnitude louder than, it came out of my capture software, and it was just completely silent. I do not know why this launch has no sound, but luckily this is the shortest of all the launches because it doesn't involve any rendezvous. I'm literally just sticking this payload in low Kerbin orbit, and then all subsequent launches will be docking with this station piece and watch it gradually get bigger and bigger. Now, I wanted to kind of do, as I said at the very beginning of this video, realistic rockets. And I feel like, this one, okay, maybe the fairing is a little bit long, but I could totally see this thing existing in real life. It's, fairly realistic looking. At least it's fairly realistically proportioned, in my opinion. But the same is not going to be said. If you follow me on Twitter, or X, whatever you want to call it, you'll have already seen the next rocket. It's very, very unrealistic, but I do have my justifications for this, and I'll explore those, I'll explain those justifications when we get there. I realise I have this really bad habit, and I've got a bit of a bad habit of always talking about this bad habit in videos as well, where I get really kind of ahead of myself, and I get excited, and I just want to talk about all the stuff I did in this mission ahead of time, and like, oh, then I did this, then I did that, then I did this, and then when I get to that part, I then have nothing to say because I've already talked about it in great detail. So what can I talk about right now? As you can see, we appear to only have 2 Kerbals on this ship, which is not true. We have 6, but I don't think I installed the mod correctly. So there is like new IVA for all of the newly added station parts is my understanding of things. And you have to install the IVA as a separate install in your Kerbal Space Program install location folder. And I don't think I did it right because we don't have IVA for the other 4 Kerbals on board. They are there. I believe they're on the panoramic observation deck thing, the one with the light. I don't know if I need to explain what the panoramic observation piece is on this vessel, but regardless, there it is. We have launched the first component of the Minmus station. We have ceremoniously renamed it to be Minmus Station. Next, I decided to launch one of the biggest liquid fuel tanks. And I thought, actually, I don't want this video to be too long, right? I value you guys' time, and I feel like it's going to be way too, like, how many launches would it have taken to launch this with realistic rockets like I set out to be? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 launches, which is a lot of launches for you to watch. And so I thought, why don't we just not do a realistic rocket? We'll combine both of these fuel tanks into one rocket. And if you want to imagine what a realistic version of this rocket would look like, just cut the fairing height in half. Actually, probably cut it into quarters. It would be more realistic to kind of split these two big liquid fuel tanks into 4 rather than just having them as 2, if that makes sense. But time's of the essence. I respect you guys. I respect your time. Let's just, and also it's funny, isn't it? It's just launching like a really dumb, like ridiculously tall fairing rocket. Like, look at the fairing to rocket ratio on the launch pad, guys. Ready? Boom. You may not like it, guys, but this is what peak aerodynamics looks like. As we I'm just looking at it on the screen. It just looks so ridiculous. Like, I haven't really had a proper look at this thing in flight, actually, because when I'm flying rockets in Kerbal Space Program, I'm guessing you guys know this, you tend to have to just stare at the nav ball. Especially, this might not be obvious, guys, but this thing was horribly unaerodynamic. Like, it was very, very it was very easy to flip it over if you're not careful. So I was having to really make sure that the little yellow center nav ball marker, I have no idea what it's called, probably should, but yeah, who's got time for that? Making sure that the little central dot never really strayed outside of that prograde marker circle, because if it did, we would just start flipping out of control. And now it looks even more ridiculous. Now we are essentially just a fairing, aren't we? As we accelerate out of the atmosphere and into the blackness of space. Now, there's a bit of a disaster actually in this flight, which is coming up around about now. I saw a bit of a wobble, so I didn't know if something had broken. I didn't know if something had broken inside the fairing, so I decided to deploy the fairing, and ironically, that was the thing that broke everything. I should have just left things. I should have just trusted the Kraken hadn't done anything, but I guess this is my hubris, isn't it? Luckily, we have more than enough Delta V in this little skipper stage to not only get us into circular low Kerbin orbit, but then also allow us to perform our rendezvous with the station core. And that's because, although I said I'd be launching these fuel tanks empty, I did fill up one of the liquid oxygen and oxidizer tanks just so that we can keep our kind of push stage fueled up, so we haven't got to have too big of a rocket. Although, I don't know. Like, if anything, I think the rocket we used was too small. It just looked ridiculous on the launch pad. So maybe I shouldn't have done that. Maybe I should have actually just done a proper rocket stage that could ferry this thing all the way to the station without needing the refuel things to refuel it, basically. I don't know how coherent this commentary is coming out. I always dread these really long commentary sessions because I'm like, oh my gosh, I gotta talk for 45 minutes straight. It's not even, it's longer than 45 minutes, isn't it? It's like a best part, and not quite. Okay, it's about 45 minutes, yeah, zooming out on the Vegas Pro timeline. It's a long old time to talk about it. Talk, just to talk, I guess. See, I'm already struggling at 13 minutes. Is that an unlucky 13 omen? I don't know. Yeah, if you guys ever like tried doing a commentary or a podcast or doing your own radio show, probably not. But it's quite genuinely difficult to sustain this one-sided conversation. I'm just sitting in a room on my own with a microphone in front of me. I've got a glass of water and a very small Vegas preview screen, and I just have to sustain this stream of consciousness that somehow kind of makes sense and is like a nice, coherent, entertaining commentary, just to kind of keep people going. But it's tough. It's a tough old job, guys. The smallest violin in the world is playing right now, I'm aware. But yeah, it's I feel like it's harder than you might think. When it's the long videos, when it's like a 10-minute video, I'm all right with those. I can talk about kind of things as they're happening, and I can add the odd little anecdote here and there. But you know, you guys have probably been with me on these like hour-long videos before, and to the end, it just becomes absolute chaos, really. Any fans of my Planet Coaster series will know this all too well. I literally just started, I would just start talking to my girlfriend, who I presumed would be watching the videos at some point, and just telling her things like, oh yeah, just remember to add pasta to the shop, because I'm going shopping on Friday, and this video is going to come out on Wednesday, so just add tagliatelle to the shop. Well, I think we need some more basmati rice as well. We're a big fan of curry here, so we use basmati rice. Best rice, do not at me. It's the best rice, everyone knows. Wow, look at this. 15 minutes in, and this is where we are. This is where we are in the commentary. 15 minutes in. Look at those beautiful clouds, by the way. Wow. Let's talk about the video. That would be a good idea, wouldn't it? That's the stock volumetric clouds mod by BlackRack. It's still a work in progress. I think they could look a little bit better from orbit. They look a little bit speckly, but they look a lot better now than they did in previous updates. So BlackRack is actively working on this mod now that he's obviously not working on KSP 2. So you know, it is getting better with each update. And I look at that, you can kind of see there's like clouds above clouds, like there's different cloud layers. I'm sorry, I'm not a cloudologist. I can't remember the terminology for different clouds. Like I know there's like cumulus clouds and weed clouds. There's like, I don't know any of the clouds, but you see there's like different heights. It's really cool and it's really fun flying through them. And now there is weather as well, so there's like rain. That's it, there's rain that you can get. So it's really cool. It really adds to the immersion. Unfortunately, I didn't encounter a rainstorm whilst filming this video, but I have encountered it whilst practicing things like testing vehicles out without the cameras rolling, or the capture card software rolling, I guess. And I was like, oh wow, it's rain. I hope that happens in one of the many launches I'll be doing in this video, but alas, it didn't. But, you know, I feel like I'm going to be playing KSP 1 for the foreseeable future, so I'm sure at some point during this channel's lifetime, there will be a moment where it rains during a launch, and we can all watch that launch and appreciate the rain. And there we are. We have docked these 2 fuel tanks to the station core, and now it's really starting to come together. Well, it's only been 2 launches, but it's now a big old vessel. Now, I didn't want to leave this engine attached because, you know, looks a bit naff, doesn't it? So I had fitted it with a probe core and a reaction wheel, so we can just detach it and deorbit it and allow it just to burn up in Kerbin's atmosphere. Now comes the most exciting part of the station construction process, and that is, of course, adding the best part. It's the big gravity ring, as well as the 4 lifeboats, and there's a little hydroponics garden as well. You can kind of see it all as we build this fairing up. Here we go. We've got the ring being encapsulated. Then, okay, that was it. There was like a station control module, I think, and a hydroponics garden. To be honest, guys, I basically just based the construction of this part purely on the aesthetics rather than actual functionality. What is a space station in Kerbal Space Program if not just, you know, a glorified Sims house, right? You just build something that looks cool. Although, while the station part looks cool, in my humble opinion, I'm not sure if I can really say the same thing about the rocket. It's the fairing ratio, again, it's an improvement, I will admit, in terms of the fairing to rocket ratio. It's an improvement over the previous rocket we launched, but it still does look a little bit top big, you know. But what can you do? I'm using the largest size diameter fuel tanks, and this is the best ratio I could do. 5 meters is the biggest fuel tank diameter in Kerbal Space Program. Of course, this is stock. The mods I'm using at the moment, I do not have any modded larger diameter fuel tanks. Maybe that could be the next mod I install. But then again, I would kind of like the next mission in this little series, which currently has no real objective. I'm just sort of doing stuff that I feel like doing, and hopefully some coherent story will come of it. I don't know. But I kind of wanted the next installment of this like series of missions to be the construction, or at least the beginning of the construction of the Minmus surface colony, which I'd quite like to be, you know, somewhat impressive. I was thinking maybe like even having some sort of runway for SSTOs to take off and land like plane. Well, it won't land like a plane, obviously, but it can take off like a plane, like, you know, on its, you know, planes take off, right? So it'd be like that. So we can have a runway. I think we need some sort of mobile functionality, at least when it comes to the mining for ore, because I have selected a spot on the surface of Minmus. In the previous installment, I used orbital scanners to find a really high concentration of ore location. So, we can do lots of in-situ mining at the colony site itself, but we will, of course, eventually deplete the resources in that area. So it'd be nice to have some sort of maybe mining truck that can just go off, harvest ore, then return to the base, then have all that ore refined, or maybe it can do it itself. There's a lot of things to think about here, guys. So if you've got any suggestions for things we can add to the surface base, then let me know. I know a lot of people have made comments with very, very extensive mod suggestions. I'm very appreciative of those comments. I have read them. I've got my own ideas of which mods, so don't worry too much about recommending specific mods unless it's like a really niche, weird thing that no one's ever heard of, then by all means, I'm all ears. One mod I have, well, not acquired, I've been informed about that not many people know about is, Actually, I can't remember the name of it, but basically, it's a stock Kerbal Space Program tech tree randomizer. So obviously, a popular mod is the community tech tree mod because Squad's tech tree, you know, the one that came in the stock game, is, you know, it's fair enough, I guess. Like, on the whole, it's reasonably well balanced, but it is a little bit arbitrary, right? Like, you start with crewed flights, and then you unlock robotics later on, when obviously, in reality, we did not launch crew at first. It was obviously Sputnik, and oh, what was it? Was it Freedom? Oh no, now my credibility's been called into question. What was the American satellite? Well, I feel like it was called Freedom. Someone's going to correct me in the comments, I'm sure. But yeah, we started with satellites and then we moved to crewed flights. But in Kerbal Space Program, obviously, it's the other way around. Now, I, for one, think that's good. That's better because it's, at the end of the day, it's a silly video game about space frogs. The space frogs, they make the game, you know, it's all well and good having a realistic launch simulation, but it's just nice to have those little smiling faces in the corner of the screen. You can't see any now because this is an uncrewed module, ironically. But yeah, it's just nice. And then you get to space and they look so happy, and you get them on EVA and they plant their little flag. They take their surface samples. You can have them play golf in KSP1. So yeah, it's just that's the little thing that's like, mwah. It's icing on the cake. So I totally understand why the game would want you to start with launching the Kerbals before doing robotic space flight. But, you know, yeah, I understand why you might want to have it be a bit more realistic if you've played the game before already. Now, anyway, that was a big, long-winded explanation about the more popular tech tree mod, which is the community tech tree that, you know, makes things a bit more balanced and realistic. This one is by Codapop, the guy that actually made my big KSP custom controller. He also made this mod that basically just randomizes the tech tree. So you have no idea what you're going to unlock on the next node. So you do your first launch, and then you unlock, like, the Saturn V first stage, but just like the fuel tank. But you still only got the, like, tiny little SRBs. So it's completely random what you unlock. So there's probably, I haven't really thought too much about it, but my first thought was that there's probably a very good chance you could just soft lock yourself. Like, if you don't unlock relevant parts quick enough, you'll end up not being able to get enough science to proceed through the tech tree, basically. So I feel like could be an interesting video in that, me trying to unlock the whole tech tree in one video with the tech tree randomizer mod. Like, usually when I do my Lowne aerospace playthroughs where I unlock the whole tech tree, I kind of set arbitrary restrictions on myself to make the videos kind of more challenging. So, for example, I'm only allowed to visit each planet and moon once, and only allowed to go to one landing site at that as well. But if I really wanted to, I could just unlock the entire tech tree in, like, just a few flights, because the science lab is very OP when it comes to getting science. But then again, when will I unlock the science lab? Nobody knows. It could be the last node I get. So maybe I shouldn't be making bold claims that I can unlock the entire tech tree in the tech tree randomizer mod, because, well, it randomized. I could unlock the science lab as the very first module, and then I might be able to unlock the whole tech tree without even doing a single flight. So yeah, many exciting things to be had there. Now we are launching the next phase of the spacecraft's construction, which I didn't talk about because I was still telling my story, my very long-winded story about the tech tree randomizer mod. But this is the second launch of fuel tanks for the station. It's those 4 orange tanks that are sort of combined into just 2 orange tanks thanks to part clipping, just for the purposes of aesthetics. And yeah, that's what I'm doing in this launch. It's funny I mentioned Planet Coaster earlier, actually, because Planet Coaster, I build stuff. This is kind of like that, right? I'm building this big, complicated building. I was thinking, and anyone that watches my second channel, shout out to all 5 of you watching, I made a big Bike Park Wales video, which actually was a really big effort in terms of editing. So if you do want to watch that, then do check that out. I'll hopefully remember to put a link in the description to it. It's about an hour long of me just rambling over me going mountain biking, shredding some mad descents, dude, down the side of a Welsh mountain. It was great fun, lots of crashes, so yeah, go watch that. And yeah, in that video I mentioned, and I'm going to mention this now, hence this introduction of this video. Okay, whatever. I was thinking about maybe doing another Planet Coaster series. What? But I'm aware that not many people watch those, you know. They usually got, when I did Adventure Woods back in 2022, wow, that long ago. I guess it was the tail end of 2022 and beginning of 2023. It's a kind of in the run-up to Kerbal Space Program 2. And not many people watch those videos. I think they average like 5 to 10,000 views, which I know for a lot of people might seem like a lot, but for a channel of my size, those are like very, very low numbers, to the point where it was actually a bit detrimental to me, because when I was talking to sponsors, when I was approached by sponsors who wanted to work with me, they were like, we just looked at your last video, Matt, and it only got like 5,000 views, and you said you would be able to give us 100,000. I'm like, right, guys, it's just nobody watches those particular videos. Why'd you make them then? You know, that's a good point. But the truth is, guys, I like making the Planet Coaster videos. It's nice just to kick back, not have to worry about quality. Like, I feel like the video content itself, like the stuff on screen, is pretty good. Like, I feel like I'm reasonably good at Planet Coaster. I'm obviously no Silverette or Ruble Trillions, but I feel like I can somewhat hold my own in making nice looking realistic parks. But yeah, they don't really appeal. They don't really have that mass appeal to my core audience, which is not I'm not having a go, by the way. I totally understand it. You guys are here for space, don't really care about theme parks. I get it. But this is what I'm trying to lead to. That I think I might have figured out a good, happy middle ground between the people that watch Kerbal content and space news content and the people that are kind of here for everything, including Planet Coaster. And that is, Kerbal Space Program 2 obviously is not being developed anymore, right? Take-Two can claim it's being worked on as much as they want, but Intercept Games has like closed down. Like, there were tweets from people who work at Intercept Games yesterday for me, so like this Thursday just gone, saying that my desk has been cleared and the office looks completely empty. So there is no longer anyone working at Intercept Games. KSP 2 is not going to continue development, it would seem, forever. So I thought, what about we make Kerbal Space Program 2's like space center a canon place that actually has been shut down. It's gone bankrupt. So in Planet Coaster, we build a 1-to-1 scale replica of the Kerbal Space Program 2 Space Center. And then, you know, we just play the role of some eccentric tycoon that comes in and purchases the place. But rather than, you know, just run it as a space agency, which, you know, would be the first thing that would spring to mind if you've just purchased a space center, was, hey, maybe just use it for its intended purpose. Instead, we just turn it into a theme park. So we, like, I don't know, put like a dark ride inside the vehicle assembly building, like a big twisty little, like Saw the Ride or the Mummy coaster. Try now think of it, indoor roller coaster off my head. Rock and Roller Coaster would have been a good idea, a good example. That's the one at Disney that everyone knows. But yeah, and then like there's the docks, so we could have like some sort of log flume at the docks. Lots of possibilities, and I think like some sort of launched coaster on the runways would be an idea as well. So there's lots of possibilities there, and yeah, I'm going to do a clock wipe just here, by the way, because I realize that the video is getting quite long, and from the way my commentary is progressing, I'm already struggling to keep the momentum. So I figured you guys wouldn't want to bother seeing me carefully maneuver the other orange tank around the station to dock it, because you just saw me do it. Because you already see me do it, and you already see me do it with the 2 white fuel tanks as well. So let's just, you know, save you guys some time, and I'll just clock wipe the movement of the other orange tank. But look at that! I staged the engine, preparing to deorbit it, and then I realized I'd forgotten to add a probe core to it, so now it's just space junk. Oops. So looks like I'm gonna have to do some sort of follow-up to this mission. Maybe it's like a sort of a Wednesday bonus video of me just going up and grabbing that debris and deorbiting it manually using another spacecraft. Now we're getting to the final thing that needs launching, which is the giant solar panel array. Probably would have been good to start with this one, right? Or at least launch it earlier than we have, because there's currently crew on board the station with very little power. Like, there's not much. It's only got like tiny little solar panels on the sides of the fuel tanks. It's not really providing that much electricity. So I feel bad for the crew. They haven't been able to, like, you know, use much power. They've been having to cuddle. They've been huddling around a little campfire they've got up there, which is rapidly running out of wood, and it's filling the cabin up with dangerous amounts of carbon dioxide, to be honest, guys. So we probably should have launched this a bit sooner, but it doesn't matter. We're launching it now. We can bring power to the people, and they can, you know, charge their Nintendo Switches. They can extinguish the campfire, have some space heaters running, because they're heaters and they're in space, and yeah, just have a fun old time. Now, construction of this rocket is going a little bit slower than the construction of the previous rockets, because I had to do a few things to the payload itself chiefly set up some action groups to not only deploy all of the solar panels all at once, because, you know, quite frankly, I didn't want to have to right click and press deploy individually for every single panel to make them extend, but also at the very top of the spire of the space station, we have a communications dish, and that sticks out kind of high above where the solar panels are, and so I put it on a hinge so they can be folded up during launch, so that the payload fairing doesn't have to be too wide, so I have to quickly set up the action group to make that extend as well, so that basically when the station is already in Minmus orbit, we press one button and the lights come on, the panels extend, the communications dish rises, and the gravity ring, that's the most important part, right? The gravity ring opens up, builds itself, and then starts rotating. And it didn't go to plan. I said at the beginning, guys, that my choice of crew, 2 engineers, 2 scientists, 2 pilots, was actually a poor move, because I didn't realize that some of these parts require very specialist kerbals to make them work. I've probably just spoiled what's coming up there, but yeah, disaster struck. Do not worry, guys. I do fix things, but made my life a bit more hellish for when it came to like getting the station deployed. Now we're on our final flight to our fledgling space station in low Kerbin orbit, and I was quite proud of this one actually. We got a very, very close target intercept. Straight, look at that, look at those markers. We're basically just encountering the target straight away. And in fact, the nav borders, did it automatically switch to target? I can't remember if I clicked it to change it myself, or if it just changed target automatically, because it was like, boy, you got very close. I'm going to change to target automatically. So yeah, we're just going to do we're going to do, strangely, a retrograde burn to circularize. It's a retrograde burn because we're burning relative to our target. And there we are. We have pretty much matched our target speed. Let's see if we can't find it. There it is. It's behind us, like a pantomime. So I'm just going to do a little burn towards the target. And yeah, we can just coast our way. I remember, I forgot to talk about the bit of a disaster I had when I was launching the orange fuel tanks. I was probably on some tangent about Planet Coaster maybe at the time, but you might have noticed I got a nice, cool encounter with the space station. I didn't realize that the course I needed to take to reach that encounter node would take me into the atmosphere, and we actually did. We had to coast about 10 kilometers down, so from 70 kilometers to 60 kilometers, and then ride back up again whilst having to use the engine to burn to make sure our apparatus stayed in space. That was a bit of a disaster, and I completely forgot to talk about it. But I was like, I remember at the time thinking like, oh, this could be a funny little thing for me to talk about during the commentary. But I guess President Matt had other ideas. But this is just me formally acknowledging that was a bit of an oops, just so people, when they write their comments saying, Matt didn't even notice that, you know, you entered a suborbital trajectory for a bit. Well, I did, obviously, because I had to use the engine to save it, and this is now me acknowledging that. But there is the station fully constructed. Well, the only thing that needs to be done now is extending the gravity ring, but I thought I would leave that folded up for the grand reveal when we arrive at Minmus. And Minmus is now where we are heading. So I thought this part of the mission would be nice and easy. It's only going to be about 5 more minutes of footage, and then the video's done. So we can start, you know, this is going to be nice and quick, and it's going to be fun. But as you can see from the, you've seen how long this video is, right? There were some trials and tribulations. I honestly thought this mission was going to be super easy. I could have it whacked out in a day, and it'd be great, and it's taken me longer than that. This has been like the longest space station video I think I've ever made. I've made space stations in Elu orbit that sent a lander down to the surface and returned that had shorter run times than a Minmus space station video. Now, granted, a lot of that is because of the fact that it was kind of a complicated build, this, I guess, but also the fact that, you know, I had to do several launches to build the space station. Normally, I launch space stations in very few launches, usually just the one launch, primarily because I feel like for video's sake, people don't want to watch loads and loads of low Kerbin orbit flights. It's more fun just to watch a really big, goofy, wacky payload launched at once. It's a more awesome spectacle, I guess. It's obviously a more challenging vehicle to fly, and it just means the video's runtime isn't too long because, you know, things are snappy. We're not wasting anyone's time by keeping the atmospheric flights short. I don't know. Does that make sense? It just makes the script more economical. I say that as if these videos have a script when it's clearly blindingly obvious that these are completely ad-libbed. But yeah, we're doing our burn to Minmus now. The footage is playing back very fast, 4 times faster than real-time speed, and we're at 4 times physical time warp. So yeah, this was a slow old thing to push around. That's why I opted for the Wolfhound engine rather than the more efficient nuclear engine, because I knew that this thing would not have particularly good thrust to weight ratio. So I thought, let's just have a slightly more beefy engine than we need at the expense of fuel efficiency, because A, we're already going to Minmus, so you don't actually need that much delta V, and if the rocket can move quicker and it's quicker to perform, maneuvers, then the video is a bit more of a nicer runtime, and for me, playing the mission, it's a bit more fun than just watch the rocket perform maneuvers at an absolute snail's pace, and everything is an absolute crawl, and it's just a bit of a slog to do, to be honest. So here I am, naively aiming for a nice equatorial periapsis at Minmus, 30 kilometers, chosen somewhat arbitrarily, I'll admit, but I feel like 30 kilometers is a nice altitude because, it's close enough to the surface that you can make out all the surface features, things like that, potentially even the surface base as well, but it's high enough that, you're clear of all the mountains, and it's, I don't know, a believable altitude for a real life. If Minmus was a real place, that might be a height we would put a space station that is very close to the surface, so I guess I picked 30 kilometers more for the former point, but also, if we're a low altitude, it's quicker and easier for ships to move between the orbiting station and the surface base. Now, in this video, I won't be building any shuttles that were designed to move between the two structures, because I haven't built the surface base yet, and I figured I didn't want to build any kind of vehicles to transport Kerbals to and from the surface and the orbiting station until I had at least the beginning of the surface base constructed. So there is the second of our burns en route to Minmus. Now, I said earlier that my choice of an equatorial orbit was somewhat naive. The reason for this is because ideally I want my space station, well, its orbit, to pass over the surface base, just so it's easier for ships to take off and rendezvous with the station, and vice versa, depart from the station and get down to the surface. Easier if, there is a point in the station's orbit where it passes over where the colony is. And I'd forgotten that the colony is not going to be on Minmus's equator. If you've not seen the previous video in this series, then basically I did an ore. I've already kind of mentioned this in this video, but I put an ore scanner in polar orbit and found a nice high concentration of ore on the surface. I went down there in a crewed vehicle and planted a flag there to mark where the colony needs to go. And I didn't check the location of that flag when I was setting up my Minmus orbit. So now you can see me happily, just merrily performing a retrograde burn to circularize in Minmus. And I'm not just circularizing here, I am circularizing here, but I'm being really, really particular about it. I'm going for a perfectly circular 30-kilometer orbit. Not exactly 30 kilometers, but, within 1 kilometer of each other, right? That's what I was aiming for. So I'm doing small burns at apoapsis and periapsis to get those numbers as close as possible. And this is about the point in which I remembered that we should probably be passing over the surface colony. Yep, there you see in the map screen, I pressed toggle flag view, which means you can see your surface flags that you've planted, and you see it, there it is, flashed up, colony goes here. So I was like, oh, whoops. So now I'm creating another maneuver node that's going to correct our orbits that it actually does pass over our colony site. Now, I still don't know if the colony is going to be like a mobile thing, like maybe it's just a series of trucks that unfold either using robotics, or they just sort of, lots of vehicles then drive out of the trucks and reassemble themselves into the colony, a bit like a, I don't know, like a Rammstein concert. Bit of a weird comparison, but if you've never seen like the time lapses of Rammstein, am I saying that right? Rammstein? Is it Rammstein? Really bad, I'm sorry. Of them like building their ginormous sets. It's very, very worth the watch. But something like that, or do we have like a land train, or do we just have a giant stationary immobile main base that then has like crawler robots that go out and mine and then return to the main base to, refine their ore that they've mined, things like that. A lot of things to think about. So I'm very open to suggestions in the comments down below as always. But yeah, as you can see, we are now in an inclined orbit that now passes over our surface base area. Now I'm once again just refining our apoapsis and periapsis points so they are roughly exactly the same, so within 1 kilometer of each other and then the goal being 30 kilometers in altitude. But there we are. The station has arrived at its final resting place. Well, not resting place, its final orbital location, which means that we can detach the engine stage. And wow, our Delta V number has shot up now. They're not carrying it around a big station with us. We're going to just deorbit it so that it crashes into the surface of Minmus and gets destroyed. I guess we didn't need to do this. We could have just kept it attached, but I don't know, I think it looks cooler to have it not attached. So this is just one station with no obvious means of propulsion itself. So it looks like I used space tugs and shuttles to build this out rather than just having it have its own engine. Wow, that was a really difficult sentence to say. So here is the money shot. We've toggled the actor group, the communications dish unfolded, the solar panels unfolded, the lights came on, but the ring did not deploy. Did you see the error message? Yep. Apparently, you need 3 engineers. You need 3 engineers present for it to deploy. So I was like, oh, well, this has just made things complicated. This is why I said, guys, that the video ended up being slightly longer than I planned, because I now have to do another mission to get engineers to the orbiting base. Now here, I've done that little trick where you've got the shielded docking port and the launch escape system at the top of that nose cone of the Apollo-style command pod. And I normally do this by using cubic octagonal struts, but one commenter on my last video suggested using an engine plate to get 2 nodes at the top instead. And that's what I did, and it worked really well. I can't credit this person because I can no longer find the comment, but if it was you, then thank you. As we launch, please let it be the final rocket of this video. Well, I know it is. Don't worry, guys. It is the final rocket of this video. I didn't make any more horrible mistakes, but now you get to see me try and do a rendezvous with something in Minmus orbit rather than low Kerbin orbit. So lots of fun to be had. In fact, it was much easier to rendezvous with things in Minmus orbit from low Kerbin orbit because you got so much time, but we got so much space to work with, basically. So yeah, maybe I should have done this for the rest of the station's construction. You live and learn, don't you? Maybe do you want me to construct the surface colony in low Kerbin orbit, then transport it to Minmus like I did in this video, or do you want me to just build it all on Minmus's surface, or build it in Minmus orbit and deorbit it there? So many possibilities. Again, I don't really know what I'm doing, basically, with mods. Yeah, I kind of get stuck in my ways, building things the same way. So if you guys want to see me build something a certain way that I've not done before, then let me know, you know? Worst I can say is no. But yeah, as this video has been going on, I've been kind of playing back the footage at faster and faster rates. I'm pretty sure almost the entirety of this flight is just 4 times faster than real-time speed, just because, again, you know, brevity's sake and all that. But there was the detachment of the launch escape system and protective fairing for the command pod with our 3 engineers all tucked away safely inside. And then we can activate our upper stage, which is a Terrier engine, reskinned with thanks to restock. Technically, restock does not actually affect the performance of anything. It just changes the visuals. I know that this technically isn't true. I believe YouTuber Veos has done some experiments and has found that restock does actually marginally change the way aerodynamics behave on certain parts. But I feel like, especially for rockets, the amount that change is very negligible. So for all intents and purposes, it doesn't actually affect things. So, you know, if you build and fly these rockets that I'm using in this video for yourself, then they should perform exactly as they perform in this video, even if you've not got restock installed. I feel like the whole it might affect aerodynamics slightly is only really important if I'm doing an actual tutorial or something, like for atmospheric flights specifically. So what I'm thinking of here is a Juno tutorial, or kind of more appropriately a lathe, or especially an Eve tutorial. I would definitely uninstall restock if I do anything like that, but I have already done an Eve return tutorial, and I feel like lathe tutorials, that's the sort of place you go. If you're going to go to lathe, you should already know how to do it, basically. Although maybe, you know, it might be a fun thing, because lathe is kind of its own challenge, right? Because it's mostly just water surface, so you got to build an aircraft that can glide to land, or just a dumb rocket that can just land in water. So maybe there is, you know, now I've got my little noggin ticking. Maybe there is some room for a lathe tutorial. Would you like a lathe tutorial, guys? Do let me know. Life on lathe and all that. But yeah, a lot of people have said, like, I sometimes see my Eve tutorial posted on Reddit saying, oh, I built Matt Lowne's rocket exactly and I can't get to orbit. And then people say, like, oh, the game has changed since that video came out, so there's a good chance that rocket doesn't work anymore. The rocket works, guys. Honestly, it's not an outdated design. My Eve tutorial, like if you type in on YouTube, Matt Lowne Eve tutorial, in the thumbnail is like a rocket landed on Eve with black text saying Eve tutorial. That video, it's got like almost 1 million views, I think. So that it should be the first one that comes up. That rocket, I can confirm, absolutely still works. I don't want to say get good or skill issue, but Eve is very, very, very difficult to take off from. Even if you've got a perfectly working rocket design, that is only really half the battle. It's just a very, very big challenge. So, you know, I don't really need to do another Eve tutorial, basically, because I've already done one that already, you know, it's not out of date, it's still there. So you can just watch that. So yeah, now I've just slagged off poor old anonymous Redditors. I don't know if that came across as mean. I didn't intend for it to come off as mean. I'm just trying to put it out there that, you know, it's not that rocket's not out of date. It does still work. I can do it. Maybe I'll do a live stream or something where I'll just do it. Although I have tried live streaming and my internet just isn't really up to it. It's just, I'm basically limited to 720p quality when it comes to live streaming. My internet is rubbish, basically. So maybe I'll do a video where I just go to Eve but just use that exact design, but then that's boring. I want to design a new rocket. I'm going to Eve of all places. So basically I have nothing to add further than that. But here we are guys. We're arriving at the station for the final time, at least for this video. I decided, so for the construction of the station itself, I used kind of the Lowne lazy method where I got the station and the part I'm docking to the station to both, you know, align themselves using auto target, because at the time I was like, well, technically the space station at the moment is a spacecraft because it needs to steer itself to Minmus. Oh, money shot. Here we go. Ah, the ring is unfolding. It's all working. Yeah, I was like, well, at the moment, the space station, it's not really a space station, right? It is a spacecraft that needs to get somewhere, so it should be able to maneuver itself, so it's not too unrealistic to suggest it can help out with the alignment. But now we are a stationary station. I thought now we should just dock properly, not have the station realign itself to make things easier. The crew module with the engineers on it needs to dock by itself. Does that make sense? I hope it did. Doesn't matter anyway because the video is over. I've already got you guys. I gotcha. Doesn't matter at this stage. And look at that. It's working, and there's the ring working during time warp as well. Now, normally when you build ring stations in Kerbal Space Program, you need to have some sort of balanced contra-rotating ring. So why is that not the case here? Why do we need another ring rotating in the opposite direction? Well, if you zoom in just here, you can see there is like a contra-rotating sort of counterweight as part of this part. So that's why we're not spinning out of control with just that one ring there. But thus marks the end of this space station's construction, and therefore the end of this video, which was made possible, of course, thanks to the wonderful names on screen. And of course, remember to download Opera browser using the link in the video description and that pinned comment. But yeah, I do hope you enjoyed this, as it turns out, extremely long and complicated mission to Minmus, who'd have thought. And I hope you enjoy the next adventure that we go on, wherever that may take us.